One of the biggest issues for voters this election cycle is the immigration and U.S. border protection. CBS reports about 2,000 migrants are leaving southern Mexico for the U.S. right now due to a lack of jobs and a delay in asylum appointments. About 40,000 migrants are currently stranded in southern Mexico as the Biden administration tightens border crossing and asylum policies. Now, both former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris have been at odds about how to handle the issue. Listen.
They have planes flying back and forth, loaded up with migrants, only going one way, by the way, to flood Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and Wisconsin.
Our focus has been on fixing a problem. And from day one, then, we have done a number of things, including to address our asylum system. And Donald Trump, but let me just finish.
Six Democrats voted against that bill.
Learned about that bill and told them to kill it.
CBS News correspondent Omar Villafranca is touring small towns across the border to talk all things immigration. Omar, good to see you, my friend. You're going to drive nearly 1,700 miles from Texas to California in just 1 week. What are you hoping to learn? Walk us through what you've learned so far.
Well, we're hoping to see border communities up close and hear from them, from people and the elected leaders there. Because while people in D.C. and the campaign trail just can say one thing people on the border are telling me is they feel like their voice is not being heard. So we're going to go listen to them and see what they have to say. We already talked to the mayor of Laredo, Texas, several hundred miles away from where I'm at right now in West Texas. And he told us their big concern when it comes to immigration and border security is to make sure that the money keeps going through, all of the business that comes through. $320 billion worth of goods are passing to and from just in Laredo alone. That's a big concern. Now, Vlad, when I say that this border is big, this is kind of a big part of the area. It is vast. There is a lot of scrub brush out here. It's not the same as it is in New Mexico or in Arizona or in California. This part of West Texas is pretty bare, but we can continue this conversation. We're going to get back on the road, and I kind of want to show you what we're seeing out here on the road. Let me punch up my camera over here. See, you can hopefully see me here. All right, you may be able to see me getting in our car here, and hopefully you can hear me, Vlad. But what we've seen so far is this has a lot of CBP. I'm actually looking to my left. There's a Customs and Border Patrol vehicle. This area is covered with that, and also state DPS. Texas has something that's called Operation Lone Star, which basically has state troopers also being a second line of defense. But people here, they want to hear about immigration reform, no matter what party, and there are Republicans and Democrats down here that are going back and forth on this locally, but they want to see Congress do the work and have some sort of immigration reform, because one thing they agree on is a lot of people coming over is just too much and it overwhelms the communities.
You know, one thing I'm struck by, Omar, is the fact that when politicians make pronouncements about towns, about communities, oftentimes when you're there yourself, in other words, you're talking to those individual residents, they tell you a very different story. We saw that in Springfield, Ohio, when the former president made some terrible false and disparaging remarks about an immigrant group in that community. The Republican mayor of the town had to refute those allegations. So I'm curious to hear from you and from the folks that you talk to how they feel about that, how they feel about people who are in Washington, D.C., who are in often cases making up stories about what people are actually living on a day-to-day basis in those border communities.
One thing that they told me to a T, no matter who we were talking to, is that it is safe here. As a matter of fact, a lot of people are saying it's got no more crime than any other major city. Matter of fact, they say it's probably got less crime than major cities. And they say that is a huge misconception. It's safe. They say it's a great place to raise a family. There's a lot of culture. And mind you, I have been all across the U.S. Mexico border. Texas alone, U.S. Mexico border, roughly 1,900 miles. Texas has about 1,200 of those miles. And we're going to take you to some of those. But there's a lot of misconceptions. I'm glad you brought that up, because they're saying it's not an overrun Wild West town where, people are shooting guns in the middle of the street like it's the Wild West. They say it's not. It's safe. It's orderly. When there are surges, there are concerns because it eats local resources, not because it is a lawlessness and people have to lock their doors and worry. So that's a central theme we're hearing regardless of political party.
I love that you're making that point, Omar. And you would assume nothing less from folks in this country, American citizens who understand that this country was built by immigrants. I would assume that even people in those border communities would understand that. Of course, there are issues. Of course, it eats into resources. Of course, our taxpayer dollars oftentimes go to helping people who are crossing the border, even those who are crossing the border illegally, and that chips away at our own national infrastructure for people who are citizens. Everybody gets that. But I think the point that you're making, which is that, and that's what many people assume. They assume that it's a Wild West aspect where there are illegal and undocumented immigrants all over the place hurting people. That is something that has not been proven to be true. I love that you're going to be reporting in that fashion, and I'm looking forward to seeing your reporting throughout the course of the next couple of days. Thank you, Omar.
Migrant encounters were down to 54,000 last month, nearly 200,000 less than last December's record high of 250,000. CBS News correspondent Omar Villafranca has embarked on a 1,690-mile journey from Texas to California along the U.S. Mexico border. He started his journey over the weekend where he traveled to Laredo, Texas. There he spoke with the mayor and discussed how that town collaborates with its Mexican counterpart.
We live and work here. We know that a lot of people come to this side to work. There's family interactions, there's relatives, there's a lot of people that share the same cities. This used to be one city before it was divided with the wars and everything. So that's why they're both Laredos, two Laredos.
On Monday, Omar made his way to Presidio, Texas, his last stop in the state before moving on to Columbus, New Mexico. He'll then make his way west toward California, where he's expected to wrap up his border journey in San Diego. Omar Villafranca joins us now from Presidio, Texas. Omar, what misconceptions are you finding about some of these border towns in Texas?
Well, Lindsay, as you mentioned, 1,600-mile-plus journey. We're about 600 miles in. But in that first 600 miles that we've traveled, the people who we talked to on these border towns, everywhere from Mission to Laredo to Del Rio, here in Presidio, one theme and a through line that we said is there's a huge misconception that these border communities are not safe, and they said that is absolutely false. As a matter of fact, we've talked to business owners and people who live here in Presidio, and they kind of whisper to us, they're like, I leave my keys and my wallet in my truck, and I leave my truck unopened. They leave their front doors open. They said this is a very friendly and safe place. A business owner just told me he's dropped his wallet in front of his business, and a friend of his actually walked by, hit him in the back of the head, and then handed him his wallet and said, hey, what are you doing? You dropped your wallet, you know? That's the kind of thing that really gets under their skin. They say this is not the Wild West. These border communities are safe. What you hear in reports or people using the border as a political battering ram, they say are not true, and they have the facts and data to back it up. So that's one of the biggest misconception that everybody is telling me about.
I feel like we hear that cycle after cycle, that there are so many misconceptions, and it's not the Wild West that we hear of. I'm from Arizona. I reported in El Paso, it was the same thing. You're in Presidio now. It's not known for being a busy migrant location, but it doesn't have a border wall. What can you tell us about this area?
Well, it's interesting. You're right. They don't have those migrant surges. There's not a lot of people coming in here from Central and South America because there's not really a bus line that'll take them anywhere here. This is a small town. The other side, the Mexican town on the other side, is actually the bigger, 30,000 over there, 5 over here. Mayor told me they don't want a border wall at all. This area is very tight with the other side. Matter of fact, they say that on Friday nights, there's a big mariachi band playing over there. A lot of people are going to go over to the other side and go have dinner and watch the concert and then come back over. One thing that they do want from the administration, whoever that is they want to beef up CBP presence here. Not for immigration enforcement per se. They're saying they want more business coming over from Mexico. They said there's cattle and produce and some limited goods that are coming over from Mexico. But if they got more CBP inspectors, then more products that already come over from Mexico, more could come. That means more trucks coming through. That means more business coming through, more money for the town. They even want to put a toll on the bridge. This is one of the few bridges where the state of Texas owns it. There's no toll on it. There's a toll on the Mexican side, not on the Texas side. They said if they could toll that bridge and the city could get that money, they could redo part of the sewer system, more infrastructure stuff. They actually want a bigger CBP presence, as I mentioned, to help business here, which is interesting to hear. They want that business coming here.
How do these towns look now compared to last year when we saw just those record numbers?
Well, in Laredo, where we're at, they've never had a big migrant problem, surges that we see, or Presidio as well. But when we were in Del Rio, we passed through Eagle Pass, you weren't seeing those huge numbers right now. The mayor of Laredo told me part of it, he believes, in his opinion, is President Biden's executive order. And he also gave a head nod to Governor Abbott, saying maybe Operation Lone Star is working as a deterrent. Now, mind you, you're not going to hear many people say that, but he did say maybe that is working here in the state of Texas. For people who aren't familiar, Operation Lone Star is a state-run program where the Texas governor is sending DPS troopers all along the border. You probably remember the headlines. They're stringing razor wire out. They can't really arrest a migrant coming over. They're not CBP. They don't have that authority, but they can bottleneck them to an area where they can be processed there. So that's one thing that we are seeing here. There's no big surges coming in here, but now we're coming to the part where it gets cooler this time of year, so we may start seeing them later on.
Omar Villafranca, much thanks to you and your crew. I'm really looking forward to seeing more of your reporting this week. It's a very interesting idea, and I know that you'll be delivering all week with this information, so thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
As we've been reporting, immigration is a key issue this election. Our Omar Villafranca is on a 1,690-mile journey from Texas to California along the U.S. Mexico border. On Tuesday, he made a stop in Columbus, New Mexico, on his way to Arizona. Omar joins us now from Douglas, Arizona. Omar, you're getting places fast. What can you tell us about your travels the last 24 hours?
Well, when we went and left Texas and went into New Mexico, you were seeing big parts of what folks here call the Trump wall. Now, there was a wall here that was built by the Bush administration, the first Bush administration, but now we're seeing parts of the Trump wall. We were in Douglas, New Mexico, and we talked to two business owners there. One of them was also the mayor. He runs a motel in town. An interesting note, he told us that they, again, want more business coming in over the port. And interesting enough, he is a Republican, but he says he will be voting for Kamala Harris this time. We also talked to a business owner who said that they want more people coming in, and they want elected officials to stop talking about how things are dangerous there. They say border towns are not dangerous, they are not scary, and that they feel that really affects the business and future business and people wanting to come to their border communities.
Omar Villafranca, we'll be following your travels all this week. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Day 4 of our journey across the U.S. Mexico border. We started in McAllen, Texas. More than 1,300 miles later, we are here in Arizona. Now, the Grand Canyon state has more than 350 miles of border with Mexico. And according to CBP data, it is also a hotspot for drug activity. The data shows us that more than half of the fentanyl seized trying to come into the U.S. happens in the Tucson sector, which is all of Arizona's ports. Now, we talked to the mayor of Douglas, Arizona. He was upset because the bipartisan border bill that was essentially torpedoed by President Trump included parts that would have given fentanyl detection machines to the Border Patrol agents. He was upset. He's a Republican, but he would not tell us who he's voting for president. Now, over in Cochise County, we talked to the sheriff there, and he's the first one to tell us that he feels that his community is not safe. He says they don't get the big migrant surges you see in other places, but he says they get drug mules and runners, which leads to almost daily chases with his officers. He's a Republican, but also says he's going to try to stay out of the politics and not say who he is going to vote for. Now, we're going to continue our journey here in Arizona, and then we're going to continue to do the last part, California, and talk to people on the border there to talk to them about what is important to them. In Maricopa County, Arizona, Omar Villafranca, CBS News.
Taking a pit stop in Yuma, Arizona, where border security is a top concern every day for both law enforcement and the people that call that region home. And that is where we find Omar this morning. Omar, good to see you, my friend. So one of the major issues that's impacting the border and those of us here in the United States and people across the border as well is drug trafficking, the scourge of drugs. What are we learning about drug smuggling, specifically at the Arizona border?
Well, it's interesting you asked that, Vlad, because this area, CBP, they categorize it as the Tucson sector. So every port of entry in Arizona is in the Tucson sector. 66% of the fentanyl that has been seized trying to come into the U.S. was caught here in the state of Arizona. So this is the pathway for more than half of the fentanyl that's trying to be trafficked into the United States. That's more than 11,000 pounds of fentanyl that was meant for the streets. So obviously the interdiction of that, catching that, is a huge deal here in Arizona. Now, let me give some context here. More than half of the fentanyl that is trafficked into the U.S., or trying to come into the U.S., comes in through a port of entry. Now, does some get through on, one or two people smuggling stuff in? Yes, or dozens trying to get in on person? Yes, but most of it, weight-wise, the big stuff, the big shipments, come through a port of entry on a truck.
And so what are people in Arizona telling you about what needs to be done about border security when this next administration, whether it's Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, comes in?
Well, they're saying, one, that Congress needs to finally do something. Not only the president, but the president, whoever that's going to be, needs to work with members of Congress, be a leader. I had one sheriff in Cochise County basically say, lock them all in a room, put pizza under the door, and don't let them out until they figure out border security and immigration laws. Because in Cochise County, in the state, they were basically feeling that it's not safe. The sheriff told me, I don't feel like this area is safe for the community here because of the amount of drugs and the people that are moving these drugs in.
All right, Omar. And you were also talking to folks in Cochise County. What are they telling you there?
Yeah. Well, in Cochise County, the law enforcement's telling us that they get people who run. Not people who present themselves at the border, that they run. And this is what the Cochise County Sheriff, Mark Daniels, told me.
That's what I wanted to hear.
This is a quality of life issue. As a sheriff elected, and I've served this county 40 years, been sheriff 12, to uphold the law and sustain their quality of life, and that is through the rule of law. And to see where we're at today, and here 3.5 years later, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of this border. It's the ebb and flow. This is the ugliest I've seen it. It's ugliest because we're not working together with the federal government.
Bottom line, Vlad, they just want something done in the next administration.
That's what I wanted to hear. Omar Villafranca, thank you, my brother. Appreciate it. Our journey across America's southern border is coming to an end. As you know, CBS News has traveled more than 1,700 miles in 5 days, talking to folks directly impacted by immigration, the voters who live and work along the U.S. Mexico border. CBS News correspondent Omar Villafranca is ending his journey in Imperial Beach, California. So, Omar, you are now in the Golden State, where illegal border crossings have sort of seen a surge in the last year, similar to Arizona, which is where you were yesterday. So how is border migration impacting communities there?
Well, it's kind of a mixed bag. In one sense, we've talked to people who say that the California economy, which is a lot of agriculture down here in Southern California, they do need the migrants and want the migrants for obviously harvesting those crops, and they have a long history of that. But of course, it puts a stress on some local communities. We were in Calexico, and people are worried because when there was mass groups of people coming over, these local budgets don't budget for 10,000 migrants showing up and what to do to them. They don't have that in the city or the county budget, so they have to rely sometimes on nonprofits, but also city money does get used. So that's the argument and the give and take that we've seen in communities across the border.
So let me ask you about this secondary wall in the border community. What's that all about?
Well, we were in Calexico, and there's obviously the big giant wall that people are used to seeing. Interesting note, though, there was a secondary wall that was leaning, and it was maybe only about 8 to 10 feet high, and it was apparently we did some research, and it was made up of leftover parts there, and cars were driving in between it. Its effectiveness is being argued in the community, and it butts up to some apartments and some homes in a neighborhood, so people are thinking it's a little bit of an eyesore, but it's there. Whether it deters people remains to be seen.
So, Omar, finally, after these 5 days and this journey that you've taken all along the border, what's your major takeaway? What do you want people to know?
Well, that there's frustration along the border in these communities. The one thread is most of the communities say it's peaceful, it's not the Wild West. There are some exceptions. But they're frustrated, and I think that frustration was put into words by the mayor of Douglas, Arizona, Donald Hewish. Here's my conversation with him about the border bill that was effectively torpedoed by President Trump. Take a listen. You were supposed to get 3 fentanyl devices with that bipartisan bill, and then it got torpedoed.
It got torpedoed, and I'll leave that to the politicians back in Washington, D.C. to determine why. But it affected us because we thought we were going to see some relief. We thought we were going to see some order.
So that kind of sums it up. People want solutions here at the border, but they're not optimistic it's going to happen no matter who wins the presidency in this election.
Yeah, except that, as you know, Omar, there was, as you pointed out, a bipartisan bill that was put forth to try and stem that immigration crisis, and the former president torpedoed it with his party because he wanted it to be a campaign issue that he could run on. So I think that the official that you spoke to is right. They don't care which party gets it done. They just want to get it done. But it appears, at least in this last go-around, there was only one person and one party that was obstructing the requirements that are needed to try and fix this. Omar, really incredible reporting all week long, my friend. Thank you very much.
What people hear about the southern border,
it's an invasion of our country.
I saw the violence and chaos.
or see on the news, can easily create a picture that all border towns are chaotic. But the reality is more nuanced, as we learned during our 1,700-mile trip from McAllen, Texas to the California coast. Laredo, Texas Mayor Victor Trevino is an independent and told us his city is not the Wild West.
There's this overrun with cartels, there's crime and this and that, which is not true.
He points to a different surge. $320 billion worth of GM and Tesla car parts, microchips, and produce that cross America's busiest port of entry by truck and train. In Columbus, New Mexico, when a driver hauling alfalfa from Mexico stops to get a bite to eat, businesses like Adriana Zazumbo's Borderland Cafe get busy, and she says migrants are needed in the workforce.
They would have to figure out a way to make them able to come over here and work. The right way, you know, the legal way, make it faster.
Arizona borders Mexico for more than 350 miles, and it is a drug smuggling hotspot. In fiscal year 2024, 66% of the fentanyl seized on the U.S. Mexico border happened in the Tucson sector, which includes all the ports of entry in Arizona, including the one behind me. In Cochise County, Arizona, car chases are an almost daily occurrence for Republican Sheriff Mark Daniels' deputies. Do you consider this area dangerous?
I do, based on the element of what we see coming across the border.
The element Daniels is talking about is the criminal kind, drug mules and human smugglers. Most, he says, are U.S. citizens involved in trafficking. Are you optimistic or pessimistic about what's going to happen here in the future?
It's more of an unknown, because politics in the country is so divided right now.
The border wall splits Calexico, California, and Mexicali, Mexico, another hotspot for migrant surges and drug trafficking. There's also a secondary, smaller wall that backs up to a neighborhood. Every border community we visited had different issues, but everyone who we talked to in these towns agreed on two things. One, that they think the next president and Congress need to work on some sort of immigration reform. And the other thing they agreed on is that they are not optimistic that anything will get passed and that things will remain the same. Omar Villafranca, CBS News, Imperial Beach, California.